Welcome to the explanation of the last lesson by Alphonse Daudet. This is the very first lesson in the textbook of class 12th students of CBSE board. The book is called Flamingo. The last lesson by Alphonse Daudet is set in the days of Franco-Prussian War, and France was defeated by Prussia. Prussia means the present-day nations of Germany, Poland, and parts of Austria. So the story is set in the French districts of Alsace and Lorraine. It begins with the narrator, Franz, being late for school. He had not learnt about participles as he was asked by his teacher, M. Hamel. He thinks of running away from the school and spending the day out of doors, where it is warm and bright. At once, he is tempted by birds chirping at the edge of the woods and Prussian soldiers drilling on the open field back of the sawmill. But he hurries off to the school, having the strength to resist this temptation. While passing the town hall, he observes a crowd in front of the bulletin board, which had been the source of all their bad news for the last 2 years, including the lost battles, the draft, and the orders of the commanding officer. As he hurries by quickly, the blacksmith watcher, after reading the bulletin, tells him not to go so fast as he would get to his school in plenty of time. It seems to the author that the blacksmith was making fun of him, and reaches M. Hamel's little garden. There he realizes that all the great bustle, the opening and closing of desks, lessons loudly repeating in unison, the teacher's great ruler rapping on the table, were all just missing. He finds everything as quiet as a Sunday morning, and he could not get to his desk without being seen now. He sees his classmates through the window, along with M. Hamel walking up and down with his iron ruler under his arm. He feels frightened and blushes to open the door and go in before everybody. But surprisingly, nothing happened, and M. Hamel kindly told Franz to go to his place quickly as they were just beginning without him. As he sits down at his desk and gets a little over his fright, he notices his teacher's beautiful green coat, his frilled shirt, and little black cap, all embroidered, that he never wore except on inspection and prize days. The whole school seems strange and solemn to him. To his greater surprise, he sees the village people sitting quietly on the back benches that usually remained empty. Among them were old Hauser with his three-cornered hat, the former mayor, the former postmaster, and several others. They all look sad. Hauser has brought his old primer, thumbed at the edges, and is holding it open on his knees, with his great spectacles lying across the pages. Primer here just means an elementary textbook. M. Hamel sat on his chair and addressed the class in a gentle tone that would be their last lesson which he was to give to them, as the order had come from Berlin to teach only German in the schools of Alsace and Lorraine, and the new master would come the next day. So he wanted them to be very attentive. These words of the master were a thunderclap to the narrator, which means that they shocked him because of the carelessness he had showed towards learning French lessons till that day. He could not give up his books of grammar and history of saints, which earlier seemed heavy to him. He also felt sad at the idea of never seeing M. Hamel again. Now he understood that in the respect of the last lesson, M. Hamel had put on his fine clothes. The old men of the village were sitting there because they were sorry for not going to school more. Also, it was their way of thanking the master for his 40 years of faithful service, and of showing their respect for the country that was theirs no more. This is often asked in questions related to the text, some of which will be at the end of the video for practice. While Franz was thinking of all this, his turn came to recite the rule for the participle. He wanted to say that out loud and clear without any mistake, but he got mixed up on the first words and stood there, ashamed. M. Hamel told him that he would not scold him, and Franz and the whole Alsace shall feel bad enough for putting off work onto the next day. The fault lay with everyone. Parents, who were not anxious enough to have their children learn and put them to work on a farm or at the mills for a little more money. M. Hamel himself too, for making the students water his flowers instead of learning their lessons and giving them a holiday whenever he wanted to go fishing. Then he continued to praise the French language and called it the clearest and most logical language. He quoted that, "When a people are enslaved, as long as they hold fast to their language, they have the key to their prison," which just meant that any community can break free from slavery or oppression as long as they do not leave their own language behind. Listen to this once again, as it can be asked in the tests. M. Hamel then taught them grammar, and the author understood it very well. This was so because the narrator listened carefully as he had never done before, and the master too explained with so much patience. Then they had their writing lesson, for which M. Hamel had new copies with France Alsace written on them. All the students set to work quietly. On the roof the pigeons cooed, and hearing this, the author wondered in his childishness if the Germans would make them sing in German. This also shows the impact that the orders from Berlin had had on him. Meanwhile, M. Hamel sat motionless in the chair, fixing his eyes on one thing or another, as if to fix in his mind how everything looked. It was tough for him too, to leave a place where he had spent 40 years. From the hope vine he had planted to the walnut trees which had grown taller. It broke his heart to hear his sister moving about in the room above, packing their trunks as they had to leave the country next day. But he had the courage to make it to the end of every lesson. It was history lesson next for the narrator, and the babies chanted their ba, pe, bi, bo, boo. Old Hauser spelled letters with his primer in both hands and cried. Then the church clock struck 12, and there was Angelus, which is a prayer, from the church possibly, and the sounds of trumpets of Prussian soldiers returning from drill. M. Hamel stood up, looking pale, and tried to address everyone in the class as his friends, but he choked, and then with all his might wrote on the blackboard, Vive la France, which just means, Long live France. And then with his hand he made a gesture without any word, that the class was dismissed and they all may go. So this was the explanation, covering all the important points. Here are some practice questions for you guys which are really important. I will give the timestamps of the answers which I have explained in the explanation. So try to answer it yourself and you will be sure to see some of these questions in your exam. Question 1. Describe how the morning when the narrator reached the school was different from the usual mornings at the school. Question 2. Who was seated on the back benches of the classroom and why? Question 3. What was the news from Berlin? How was it a thunderclap to the author? Question 4. According to M. Hamel, whose fault was it that the students had failed to learn French language? Question 5. What were the things that tempted Franz to run away from the school that morning? And here is a bonus question for you. How did M. Hamel teach the students on the day of the last lesson? What effect did it have on Franz? Thanks for watching, and I will be making these explanations and practice question videos for you guys of class 12th CBSE board, and hope you guys like it.